Hey there, Buford Middle School students. This is Mrs. Wilborn again, and welcome back to our continuation of Lesson 3, and this was covering operations with fractions. We're going to continue on with multiplying fractions. When you're multiplying fractions, in my opinion, this is a lot easier than if you're adding or subtracting fractions, because you don't have to worry about common denominators. So we basically have 3 steps that we're going to complete. Our first step is we're going to multiply the numerators. Our second step is we'll multiply the denominators. And finally, we'll simplify the fraction. So let's look at this example right here. 2/9 times 3/12. So I'm going to rewrite this problem so that I have the fraction bar. Instead of the backslash. And I'm going to follow my steps and just simply multiply the numerators. So 2 times 3 gives me 6. And 9 times 12 gives me 108. So now I need to go through and simplify my fraction. And I want to go through those divisibility rules. Well, I know both numbers end in an even number, so they're divided by, both are easily divided by 2. So I could go ahead and take care of that. Or I could think further and say, well, is there a bigger number? And in this case, there is a bigger number. I know 6 will go into 108, and that's just because of practice of what I've done. So you may need to break it down and simplify the problem several times. All right, but since I know 6 goes into 108, I can divide it by 6. So 6 divided by 6 is 1, and 108 divided by 6 is 18. So my final answer here is 1 over 18. Okay, here are some your turn questions. Go ahead and pause the video, try these on your own, and then we'll go over them in class tomorrow. Okay, dividing fractions is basically multiplying fractions with a small step beforehand. So this is probably the most important step that you need to remember. And then once you complete this step, you will do the same steps that you did for multiplying. And the first step says to keep it, change it, flip it. And that's a little saying that you can use to remember how to set up the question correctly. So the keep it part of that little saying refers to the first fraction. We're going to keep it just the way it is. So we're going to leave it just like 2/10. I am going to rewrite it without the backslash. The change it part, I'm going to change the division to multiplication. So I'm changing the operation from division to multiplication. The flip it part refers to the second fraction. And that basically means I'm going to put the denominator in the numerator spot, and I'm going to put the numerator in the denominator spot. And now I can go through and basically multiply straight across. Okay, so I've done step 2, I'm moving to step 3. 2 times 12 gives me 24. And 10 times 2 gives me 20. And so simply now I just need to reduce my fraction. So I'm looking for a common factor. All right, well, I know, again, they end in even numbers, so they're definitely divisible by 2. But I'm also looking, is there a larger number that would go into each? And yes, 4 is what sticks out for me. 24 divided by 4 will give me 6. And 20 divided by 4 gives me 5. Now, in 7th grade, you do not have to change your fractions to mixed numbers. You can leave any improper fraction improper as long as you make sure that it's simplified. Okay, go ahead once again and pause the video, and you can complete these, and then your teacher will review them in class tomorrow. Okay, a couple more vocabulary terms that you need to know. The first one is equivalent fraction, and these are fractions that name the same value or the same number. So for example, I could say 1/2 is equivalent to 5/10. Okay, the second vocabulary term is proper fraction, and this is when the numerator is smaller than the denominator. And these are probably fractions that you're very familiar with. So an example here could be 3/7. Okay, the numerator is smaller than the denominator. And an improper fraction is just the opposite, when the numerator is larger than the denominator. Just like in our dividing fractions example, we had 6/5. So anytime the numerator is larger than the denominator, it's an improper fraction. And finally, a mixed number. A mixed number is a whole number and a fraction. So something that might look like 1 and 1/3 is an example of a mixed number. If you need to pause the video to complete the definitions in your notes, please do so. Okay, when we're changing improper fractions to mixed numbers, okay, although we won't do this much in 7th grade, it is important to remember how to do this. And to do this, basically all you have to do is divide. All right, so you'll look at your question, in this case, 55 divided by 9, and I'm going to set it up to divide it out. And we know the top number, or the first number, goes in the house. So first come, first serve. And in the house means that it goes in the division symbol. And the second number, or the bottom number, is going to go outside. And now I would simply divide my numbers. So 9 into 55, I know will go 6 times, going through my 9 times tables, and 9 times 6 is 54. I'm going to subtract like I normally would. 5 minus 4 is 1. 5 minus 5 is 0. Whatever you have left over becomes the numerator in the fraction of the mixed number, and then the denominator is the number that was outside. So 55/9 is the same as 6 1/9. Again, go ahead and pause your video. Here are a few for you to try on your own, and they'll be reviewed in class the next day. Okay, and if we go improper fractions to mixed numbers, we certainly want to make sure we understand how to go from mixed numbers to improper fractions. So when we're doing that, we have a little system that we call the check mark method. And basically it helps you to remember, the shape of the check mark helps you to remember what numbers you're going to work with. And so if you look at the steps over here, it says to multiply the whole number by the denominator, and then add the result to the numerator. All right, so for example, we're going to make a check mark, and I'm going to start with my whole number, just as look at the shape of this check mark. It kind of starts up. So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to take my, sorry y'all. I'm going to take my pen on my whole number, and I'm going to make a check mark. So I'm going to multiply it with the denominator, and then I'm going to add my numerator. So 6 times 2 is 12, plus 1 is 13. So my new numerator is 13. My denominator stays the same as 2. Okay, sometimes I know in 6th grade some talked about the Texas method, and we had the T over the X, and it was basically the initials for Texas. So this is another method you could use. And these signs relate to the operations that you're going to do. So 6 times 2, and then you're going to add the 1, add the numerator. Okay, once again, pause your video. Here are a couple for you to work out on your own, and they'll be reviewed in class the next day. All right, finally, in the last section of this lesson 3 is to actually work with problems that you have mixed numbers in. And our steps are listed here. The very first thing you're going to do is to convert all mixed numbers to improper fractions. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. And 7, so I'm going to use my check mark method, 7 times 12 plus 7. That's kind of how that's going to work. And if you don't know your 12's times tables, well then off to the side you can use your scratch sheet of paper. So I would just write 12 over here times 7, and then go ahead and multiply that out. So 7 times 2 is 14, put down the 4, carry the 1. 7 times 1 is 7, plus 1 more is 8. So I have 84. So 7 times 12 is 84, and then I need to add 7 more. So I can add 7 more to what I got previously. And 7 plus 4 is 11, so I'm going to put down the 1 and carry the 1. And 8 plus 1 is 9. So this gives me 91. So I have 91 twelfths. Remember, I always keep it over the same denominator. All right, and now I need to go through and convert my second to mixed number, my second fraction. So 3 times 6 I know is 18, and 18 plus 4 gives me 22. So that one I could do better in my head. So I'm going to write that down here. That's my new numerator, 22, and I'm going to keep it over my denominator of 6. And I wrote it down below because the operation in here tells me to add. And I know when I add, I want to leave my fractions lined up vertically. So now I have to complete lesson 2, follow the necessary steps. Well, since I have adding, I need to find a common denominator. All right, and I have a 12 and a 6. And so I know my common denominator is going to be 12, which means I can leave my first fraction exactly as it is. And my second fraction I will need to rename with a denominator of 12. So 12 times what number 6 times what number gave me 12? Well, I know that's 2. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. And 22 times 2 gives me 44. I now have common denominators, so all I need to do is add below. So 91 plus 44, 1 plus 4 is 5. 9 plus 4 is 13. So 135 over 12. And again, I would need to go through and reduce this. So I'm going to run through my divisibility rules and figure out what numbers can I simplify out here, if any. All right, well, I'm looking at the number, and they don't end in even numbers, so I know that that's not going to work to use a 2, but I can see that both of these numbers are divisible by 3. And the reason why I know they're divisible by 3 is because when I add the digits, they're all divisible by 3. So off to the side, I can go 135 divided by 3, and I could do all that work. But for time purposes, I know that that's going to give me 45, and 12 divided by 3 gives me 4. And that's about as simple as I can take it. Here's one for you to try on your own, and your teacher will review this in class with you tomorrow.